In this episode, we discuss self-experimentation. Welcome to the Neat Athlete Podcast, a podcast discussing healthy habits, lifestyle design, and all the controversial fitness thoughts we have. Let's do this.
Yeah. Sweet. Okay. So the topic of the day, basically, is how to do a good self-experiment. So what we were talking about?
It is. And I was curious, first of all, I love this topic idea. It gets me super excited. And I was wondering if we're talking both like internal and external, like self-experimentation,
Okay.
meaning like things in my life
Mhm.
I change to help me as self-experimentation, and then also like actual intake of like say foods or whatever for self-experimentation.
Okay. Okay. Well,
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking kind of all of the above, I would say.
Okay.
I'm also thinking I didn't even think about categorizing it, honestly. But
Yeah. Right.
now that you're categorizing it, there is a little bit of, you make me notice that there is a little bit of a difference, yeah, between them in terms of how you attack them, I would
Okay.
say.
Okay.
But generally speaking, which is the easiest way to talk about it without getting in trouble, um, I was just thinking of when someone's like trying to do, oh, let's go with the nutrition goal. Let's go with
Okay.
the nutrition goal, I would say, because that's probably the most common, I
Yeah.
feel, right?
So
So someone's going with a nutrition goal, and what is the goal? So they're trying to reduce their overall calories.
okay, something easy.
Right. There you go.
Okay.
Right. Um, how do they know that they're actually reducing their overall calories?
Okay. All right. I like that. I think that's a perfect place to start, because everyone at any part of their fitness journey can like restart their nutrition. And I think this is like a good time to go into this self-experimentation talk. So
Right.
where would you start?
So I think it's really useful to start with the mindset that you kind of alluded to there, which is um, you're always kind of going through these cycles of restarting, you know, and
Okay.
that's not a bad thing. So what we're gonna do for this experiment, it doesn't mean it's gonna be this for the rest of your life, you know, but we're trying to kind of suss out from this experiment what knowledge we can use for the rest of our life. But you're not going to be running this experiment for the rest of your life. Then it's no longer an experiment by
Right.
definition, almost,
Right.
unless you're doing a really long-term study, I guess. But for the most part, I'm talking about like short-term experiments,
Okay.
like
Should we just define like how to do an experiment? Like
mhm,
because
mhm.
like a big thing is this all goes back to school, right? Like in doing the scientific method, right?
Exactly.
So I pulled up a quick image from Wiki, and it goes like this. Like, so you get an observation or a question. And
Hmm.
so like in this instance might be like, man, I'm gaining weight, right?
Hmm.
Or like, like, so I need to reduce my calories, right? So then you have to research some kind of topic area, which would be your nutrition. Research would be either going online and doing your own research, or going to someone like you, or who knows a ton about nutrition and can coach you through the steps,
Right.
because really the coach is key, right? Then you have to create your hypothesis. So like say if you're coaching somebody, you have your hypothesis, and you say, all right, well, if I reduce my calories by XYZ, say 300 calories, then you can go ahead and 300, say if I'm going to reduce my calories by 300 calories a day for a month or whatever, then that would be your hypothesis. And then what? You have to test it, right?
Right.
So you go through that month, and then you can go in and suss out these details, because I know you have awesome points for all this stuff. I'll get through the scientific method real quick.
Do
And
it.
then you
It's
test it.
important.
Exactly. And then you have to analyze it, right? So you have all your data, and you have to figure out like, okay, did I lose weight? Did I gain weight, etc.? And then at the end, you need to look at your conclusion. And I think this is what you were getting at before, where you have to decide, okay, this experiment is either going to change a little bit, or it's going to stay the same for a little while, or maybe I'll bring this back in the future. Does that sound pretty like an overall view of everything?
Exactly, exactly. And so when people are doing it for themselves, they're not always going to have the scientific method in front of them, but remembering those general rules, you want to really try, and I like to set that time frame first, honestly.
Okay.
And then after that, once you kind of know what time frame you're working in, start to accrue as much data as possible. So the most data for your calories, what would be the most data? How would you get the most data for your caloric intake, right? You would do something like a food journal.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and so if you're doing a food journal, we're kind of going to walk through this scenario basically.
Okay. Okay.
And you're doing a food journal and you're trying to figure out, okay, I eat these many calories. How often do I eat these many calories? I eat these many calories every day. I eat this many calories every week. Like, what's your metrics, for your observation?
Okay.
So there's a lot of different details that, yes, a coach could help you with, do the research with, for example, right?
Yeah.
But how do we get this to the point where someone could make this happen like tomorrow? Like they could start tomorrow with something and still do a good research project. What do you do, for example, when you're doing a good research project?
Well, I mean, for this, I would get the right tools. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, for me, I would definitely use, like, my Fitness Pal or something like that is super easy with this. And
Fitness Pal is great. Yeah.
yeah, my Fitness Pal works. Lose It, work
Mm-hmm.
is a pretty decent one that works. I mean, anything that can track your calories. And I'm not a big, fan of tracking calories all the time. But
Right.
if you're trying to figure yourself out, and this is an experiment, so I mean, you want to have good data, you want to track it as good as you can. So that would be my first step, is getting some good tools. And like you said, is figuring out the time, like how long can you, like, so you're going to start tomorrow, how long can you keep this experiment up?
Right. Right. So then the intervention basically needs to be easy enough for you to sustain a lot of times. So sometimes counting the calories for the whole week might be hard for people. So
Yeah.
what do we do? So what do we do then? Do we do like weekends, or do we do like every Friday, for example? We're just trying to get good, or like what metric works for you is important to figure out as well. But the consistent part and the tracking part, I think a lot of times is what keeps someone from doing something like tracking calories,
Yep. Yep.
right? Or like the learning curve. There's a big learning curve at the beginning, right?
Yeah,
So people
sure.
don't want to do that either. So you get a lot of diets that are like macro cutouts or elimination diets because it's easier than counting calories.
Sure. Sure.
Okay. What's your opinion on we're going to diverge a little bit. What's your opinion on counting calories?
On counting calories. I usually, like, I was, so pretty much like I was just saying, I almost never count calories
Mhm.
myself. I have counted calories many times, and I can kind of figure out from, and I think this is actually just constant experimentation.
Mhm.
I can figure out how I'm doing. So for instance, like, one thing I'll do is add a big carb in the morning, like a bagel. And I'll play with that a lot, and I'll take that in and take that out. And
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
for me, that can be a huge difference. Like, I feel super energetic when I add that carb in the morning, where it really fuels me to actually lose more weight. And I would never
Spend your
have,
energy more, right?
it gives me more energy. I have good workouts. My gut feels great. So, like, how I experiment with food and nutrition is because I don't count calories really anymore. And so I'll add in, like, that carb, or because I know that the carb really can make a difference for me for those 2 pounds in the week, like if I want to be strong or if I want to cut calories.
Right. So do you, I'm being devil's advocate here because I'm not a huge fan of counting calories a lot of times either.
Okay.
But I thought this would be a good example because we hear it a lot. But both of us counted calories at some point, enough to the point that we felt like we could eyeball things pretty well and kind of know what that thing was made of, if that makes sense, right?
So I think, yes.
Yeah. Do you feel like do you feel like hmm as time goes on, you kind of lose that skill? Like if it's been a while since you counted or looked at nutrition labels or anything like that?
I would say that, well, yeah, of course. I mean, there's like anything, you're going to lose a little bit of the skill if you're not doing it. But I
Mhm.
feel like I've adapted other skills in place of that. Like I don't worry about losing or gaining 5 pounds on the scale,
Right.
but I know by looking and knowing how I feel the next day from what I ate the previous day and how my gut feels and what my weight does on the scale, I know what I did and what I need to do. And I think because I've counted calories and experimented a bunch, like it's just almost a natural thing now instead of, and which is not helping the newbie, right? Like,
Hmm.
but I do think that's what every person starting on their journey should count calories, at least to be honest with themselves about how much they really are eating, and including those weekends and including those 5 pieces of pizza that you eat on Saturday night at 11 p.m. and because literally those couple meals can make all the difference, and you won't know unless you're counting calories.
Right, right. So, like calories in terms of the scientific method or counting calories, I would say for like a week, and maybe some people do it longer, some people do it shorter, but like a week's pretty general, so you get a good idea. And sometimes, a lot of times, when people do it longer, I feel like the reason they do it longer is because, like, wait a minute, all I did was count my calories and I saw results, which I
Yeah,
a lot. Yeah.
yeah.
But it's like it's a really good way to get data. But you just also mentioned a lot of other good ways to get data, and I think like observational data is still very good data. It's just um, and nowadays, what's really nice is you can go back on your phone and look back and see changes. You know, just by
Absolutely.
if you're someone who takes pictures or uses your phone for communication, basically, you can find a way to, um, like if you track your weight on your phone, for example, or if you track how you feel at all. But
Mhm.
I think you still gotta kind of track in some way, and I think that's probably the biggest barrier for a lot of people that makes it hard to do a good experiment, right?
I think so. What like because I do so much self-experimentation,
Right.
I've gone through these phases with the scale. So this is another interesting thing. I'd love to know your opinion on the scale.
Mhm, mhm,
So we're
mhm.
going off the edge just a little bit, but like with the scale, when I first started training people,
Right.
I always was like, let's get on the scale, let's get on the scale. Then I switched to, let's not deal with the scale as much. Let's just do like say once a month, right? And then and then I realized that kind of every person is different, right? Like every person is going to need something different. And right now, for me in my experimentation life, I really get on the scale almost every single day because you can have that data for months and years in your phone, and really it shows like just the trends,
Mhm.
and I can get a lot of useful information and feedback like just from the data on my apps.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I really like and this is a personal thing because I've heard people feel completely different. And I think we kind of both reinforce each other here. But I really like the idea of having a lot of health data about yourself, um, logged on your personal device so you can look back on it. Like there's been so many times when my client who has like an Apple Watch or even just a phone, but they keep their phone with them, so I know it's tracking their steps, for
Right.
example, and I know how to find where it's tracking their steps, even though they never looked at it. I can be like, hey, can you do me a favor real quick? We were trying to figure out like why her hip, or I can't remember what it was, some kind of like walking gait related, thing.
Yeah.
And we looked back on her steps when she was kind of like a snowbird.
Okay.
And she didn't think she walked that much when she went away for like a long vacation, and I don't remember where it was, a warmer state, basically. And I'm butchering this, but we were able to look at her data because her phone was already tracking it. I'm like, oh, your steps went up by like almost double than what you were doing on the regular, and your hip and your ankle and everything, like, probably wasn't ready for that.
Right. Right.
And so that makes a lot of sense why you're feeling it here. And we know, okay, that because you were walking so much, even though you didn't feel like you were walking so much,
Yeah.
later you felt it.
But the great thing about that is now that you have that data on your phone, the next time she goes on vacation, she can know that, hey, you know what? I'm probably going to walk a little more. Let me, minimize some of my strength training and add a little bit more mobility in for these few weeks. And that can really help her in the long run.
Right, right. Just by keeping that data, and like she really didn't do anything to do that. So that's like a really easy one,
Yeah.
because but that's more common than you think. Some people won't like that at all, though, honestly, because they feel like their privacy is being, and I get that. That makes sense too.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
I don't know how good I feel about my health data being stored on my phone. That's also accessible through the internet, and pretty much means the whole world can get at it if they really wanted to. But it's pretty cool to know when my resting heart rate has been trending on the downside when I've been working my ass off in the gym.
It's really cool, right? I mean,
You know?
that's a fun thing to see. And I've seen the opposite. I did a test maybe right when COVID started. So this was like 2 years ago, of actually my resting heart rate. And I was commuting for 3 hours a day in the
Mhm.
car, and you could see the drop off. And I think it was by about like 4 beats per minute, from commuting those 3 hours to not commuting those 3 hours. And which is
Yeah.
amazing, that's a big difference,
Yeah,
man.
dude.
Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I'm like not that stressed guy. And so
But like you're driving a couple ton machine down down the high, like you can't not, there's a reason there's road rage. Like everybody's brain is just gonna be on that upper level basically, or else you're not driving well, I almost feel like.
you're almost in flight or flight, I think.
Yeah. You're
When
like
you
right before you're on the precipice, basically. So people like basically people learning how to drive learn to keep it from tipping over,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. And then that's why a lot of people get their road rage, is because, one or two things happen, and then it's like, bam, you just
That's it.
switch,
Yeah.
and then it takes even a super mindful person 5 or 10 minutes to calm down sometimes once your body goes into that mode.
Right. Right.
But anyway, let's get back onto topic,
Sounds like my children.
self-experimentation. So we did food and nutrition. I mean, is there anything other, like, what else about self-experimentation did you want to talk about today? Because I know this was your curiosity cue, but I absolutely love this stuff too.
So I want to talk about it because I feel like I want to try and figure out how we could make it more possible for people, who aren't nerds as much like us. But
Right.
I also want to clarify a little bit like what a good experiment looks like, because there are some people who are nerds like us that I see not doing, like, we're not doing like our self experiments aren't getting published in any journal. So I'm not saying we're like great self experimenters and everything.
Sure, sure.
But when it comes to like exercise and nutrition, I feel like we're pretty good at self experimenting, you know?
Absolutely. And
So,
life stuff, like
yeah,
because I think that all goes in hand in hand.
right. And I think you can transfer it very, very well once you get more practice at it. But I see maybe I see some people doing it for like the first time, or it seems like they're doing it for the first time. And
Right.
there's some general principles, like I would say getting enough data is a big one.
Sticking with something to get that data.
Getting something to get that data with. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Another one, like, what do you like? I'm curious to hear your opinion. Like, where do you see people fail on this, and like what could help? I could list off a couple things, but
Well, usually it's too many things they're trying to change at once. So like one thing that I like to change a lot is like my schedule. And not a lot, right? That's the point that we're trying to get across here. But like, so I'll see somebody fail like, okay, I'm gonna do a morning routine. Like that's what they'll like, because like
oh,
getting
like a miracle morning.
sure,
Like,
yeah, you know, anything. Like I've written my Josh Lemon's Miracle Morning somewhere. It's pretty awesome. But that's the thing. How many times have I done that Miracle Morning
that's
because
so
of what
freaking hard.
because of
Oh,
because of what I'm about to say is that like you think of this a miracle like awesome morning, but it has 5 steps in it. It has 5 different things. You have to do your meditation, your yoga, your reading, you know, all this writing,
affirmation,
all within an hour, right?
visualization,
Gratitude practice, all that stuff. And
ice bath.
I well, I would do a cold plunge. Man, I miss the sauna. But anyway, so you do all that stuff and then you fail, right? You do it for like 3 days or whatever.
Right,
And
right.
so I think the biggest
There's an inverse relationship between how many things you do and how many days you do it for.
right experiment, like a good experiment, you're only changing one variable. I think
Mm.
that might be the big key that I want to get out there, is that like
Yeah.
when you're doing something, just change one thing and try and do that well and get the data on that one thing for however long you think, a week or a month. A week or 3 days to a week would be easier though.
Yeah, well, coming back to, so that's like, it's almost like first priority, I would say, right?
Right.
Because you're not going to get you're gonna peter out real quick if you don't get that under control fast, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the longer you do it, the more the data has priority, right?
Yeah, it's hard to see something in one day, but you do it for a week, or you can kind of see the trend a little easier.
Right, right, exactly. And then I guess really, so if we were to do like a 1, 2, 3 process,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last thing would be like making accurate conclusions or observations
Okay. So
about it.
so how would you make an accurate conclusion? Like what would be like, how would you use the data and look at that and make an accurate conclusion? I mean, with weight loss, it'd be easy, right? You could just see, like you should be able to see, okay, I had 2,000 calories on Monday and my weight stayed the same. I had 1,800 calories on Tuesday.
Weight loss is a great example. I'll give you.
And I had 1,500 calories on Wednesday and I started going down a little bit. But then once you hit Friday, you have 3,000 calories and you wake up Saturday morning and you're 3 pounds heavier than you were on Monday.
Right, exactly. So like weight loss, for example, might not be the right metric for you to measure your progress.
Very true. Very true.
So you might, that might be your conclusion, for example, then. It might be better to do body fat or circumference measurements.
Right, because you're not always like, from the experiment, you can learn more than just what you're learning. Like you can learn
Yes.
how to experiment better.
Yes.
And I think you get that only by constant experimentation.
Right. And I think you got to have a mindset that like a good experiment like doesn't, probably rarely proves your hypothesis.
Right. Right. True.
Like really proves it.
Right.
Like it might support it, but proving it is going to require probably further experiment. Spoiler alert, this is all a big multi-level pyramid scheme, actually.
Why is that?
Because once you do one experiment, you're going to have to do more experiments, basically.
We're almost going
Gotcha.
into like a philosophical talk, because
That's what I think the conclusion kind of comes to. Yeah, I think you got to get philosophical about it.
Because experimenting is something that, like, there is no end in life until you're dead, right? Like,
Mhm.
doing an experiment or doing anything in life, you know that it can and will change. You know that like literally everything and anything can change at any time. And so doing an experiment, you could do the same experiment every week for 52 weeks and probably get a little bit different results and see a great trend and then really figure out something.
Mhm, mhm,
But
mhm.
and that's just living that whole experimental life. I mean, at this point in my life, I don't even know how to not live that type of life,
Right.
if that makes sense, because
I think people must do it in other parts of their life. I feel like it's more obvious maybe to us as coaches,
sure.
but I feel like people must do it and maybe not think of it like that. I feel like that's a natural mode for certain things that we're trying to get better with.
I
Maybe they're
I
not the
do.
best experiments, maybe they're more like stumbled into experiments, I guess, right?
Absolutely. I mean, how many people, are going to work and they take two different routes, right? Like, well, I mean,
Exactly.
everyone's constantly experimenting in some ways, but I guess we're talking specifically about health here, right? And like
Right.
health and improving your life. And I do think that you have to kind of prioritize that in some way and then go
The
ahead.
hard part is because the priority is probably not exactly there, right?
Right, right. Because most people don't define their priorities or their
Mhm,
values,
mhm.
which is just a whole entire like talk to get into, but like if once you have your values set and you know that, like, so say Josh is like family, and then health, or maybe let's say health first because I like to use this sometimes. Health at the top, then family, and then work, and then something else, right?
Survival.
And then what?
No, survival's kind of with health, I guess.
Survive, right, right. So I like to put health up top and like so.
Narcissism, number 4. Hedonism, that's what I'm thinking of.
And that, yeah, so I don't even know where I was going with that. So I was going to say, like, you have to choose your value, and
Mhm.
then once you have clearly defined values, then that's what you experiment in, right? Like, so if your value at that time, like if your value for the day is you have to get to work and you have to work on this project at work so hard, you might skip out on your health goal or whatever. But like, to me, I always tell people that they need to prioritize their health, and the reason is because once you get to work and you start working, you're going to get like, and I know this, man, because I'm just coming off of 10 years of working in the corporate world. Like, it's easy to get burnt out, and it's easy if you don't prioritize health. And I prioritized health in the workforce about 2 or 3 years ago, and it made a huge difference. And so if you prioritize your health, then these experiments and stuff like that really become second nature. And I do think that this is kind of a little philosophical, but what do you do with people who don't experiment? Like, how do you get them to start experimenting?
I feel like a lot of times what I do in those
Oh, no.
situations is, and again, it's funny because I think I do this with my kids too. I just try and be like a good example as much as possible,
Yeah.
and I talk about experiments
Okay.
and I try to like put experiments in front of them, and see if they'll just grab it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Not be like, take this experiment, but I'm like, well, if you're trying to figure that out, I would do blah, 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 blah. And then if you want, I'll ask you about it next time.
Yeah. I think for us dads, it's easy to really to just do the role model thing, right? Like, because
Yeah.
I mean, you if we're not good role models, then they will see that, and that's it. So I mean, that's definitely a motivator for me.
Yeah.
What
And I'm
about
not like a really quiet coach. I can't stop yakking. Like if you want a coach to just like stand there and count the reps for you, I'm not that kind of coach. I, I gotta have a story, or I gotta catch up and get all that stuff in the
Yeah,
background.
that's awesome. Do you take this personal? I don't know if you want to answer this. Do you take
Wow.
notes about clients, like about
Yeah.
what, about like what interests them and things
I
like that?
try to.
So you
I
don't.
wish I took better notes, honestly. I wish I was more creepy about it. Uh,
I mean, it's creepy, but if you don't have a good memory, it's just taking notes, right?
I know exactly, that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. But for a while I had and honestly, my business did really good when I did it. So like all the time I'm like kicking myself to actually do this. But okay, businesses have this all the time, and the software companies make buku dollar off of it. They're just called client relationship management tools,
Okay.
or CRMs. Do you ever work with the CRM?
Yeah, I've worked on like HubSpot before.
Yeah. Okay. And you put your client in there and you're like, what did you talk about the last call?
Right.
And
Yeah.
then you put like interest and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
John Goodman from like Online Trainer Academy.
Yeah.
Do you see that post he had where it was like when he was first starting out as a trainer and they had to do the whole floor thing?
And he had an Excel spreadsheet that had,
Yeah,
yeah, I did see that post.
I was a genius. Like I kept those things in mind, and every time I remembered them, it was like it was really useful. But to do a fucking Excel spreadsheet is genius.
Yeah, I mean, true.
And he had really good like answers, like really good categories. It
Right.
wasn't as like obvious as just like what's your birthday, that kind of thing. Like what do they care about? Like what's their, I don't remember, but it was really good categories. I wish I had that pulled up actually.
Man,
But
everyone trains their own way. I had a pretty simple system for this. I always have my next workout with
mhm,
me while I'm training them
mhm.
to change anything, like if you need to for the next workout. And then I just jot on that piece of paper like whatever we were talking about. Like
Yeah,
and I did like a couple notes, like just like one or two things. And then just
like
so I
that.
know when I pull up that paper, like maybe the night before I'm writing out their program, or if I need to change anything in their
Oh
program,
yeah,
I
yeah.
can have that and then kind of know what I'm going to talk about with them the next day.
I've done that before. Yeah, that works well. That
Yeah.
works real well. But that doesn't like, it's hard to refer back to that, like in terms of good data, for
Oh yeah.
example. Like
Yeah.
experimenting. Now we're experimenting with our clients. But no, I think it's really
That's it.
useful overall. I really do, because like, yeah, you have good data and then you can help them better. And billion-dollar companies have figured this out and made client relationship management tools. Like I think it's really useful. I think I know a lot of people, a lot of famous people who are really well known for like being very confident and persuasive and all those good words and stuff like that, and executives. I've
Yeah.
trained executives that keep, yeah, they pay people at that point to give them the heads up on who they're going to be seeing and what's going to be talked about probably, and what they talked about. Like they pay somebody to keep the spreadsheet for them at that point,
Right.
basically. But everybody thinks it's natural, and it's not, which is kind of, I can see where at some point that could be, is it facetious? I don't know. But not genuine, disingenuous.
Well, yeah, but no, but like we were saying, some people you just can't remember.
Right. And it depends on what you use that information for too.
Well,
You know,
if you're just chatting with them is one thing,
right,
but if you're
right.
like Facebook and you're collecting crazy data,
If you're trying to manipulate them against their will, I
right?
would say. I think that's where you can get in to a immoral position with that information. And I think people might be afraid of people having that information because
Sure,
they might feel like they could be manipulated more.
absolutely,
I'm
and
trying to
I.
go to the dark side here with this a little
But
bit.
that's all right. That's why we all need to track our own. Like it would be cool if an app came out where we can just all track our own personal data and it
Mhm.
all stays to us. But all these apps go to everybody.
Good luck finding
Yeah,
out.
exactly.
On that such a positive note, keep experimenting.
So, are there any other experimental
What are you
things like?
what are you doing right now? What's like an experiment you're doing right now? What's something you're keeping an eye on or working on right now?
Well, the bagel thing is definitely one experiment.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I don't have, I guess I have fitness experiments right now.
Mhm.
And so
Like a
I,
program is a good experiment. I feel like a workout program or like a plan, like a workout plan right now
Yeah.
Are you running a long-term experiment right now?
So I've been running my long-term experiment on my NEAT fitness program, like
Uh,
which I think I've definitely told you about, which is just a small like micro doses of resistance training.
the micro doses make so much sense.
Yeah, small doses of resistance training with a bunch of NEAT. But the thing is that like that's just to maintain like your normal homeostasis almost.
Mhm.
And I like to call it like always be 90 days out. And then but so I'm actually in the beginning parts of a workout plan. And for me, I usually experiment almost for like a month before I sink into my plan.
Okay.
And yeah,
So you're working on putting it together right now.
and I'm working out too. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm putting it together and tweaking a few little things because I want to do a strongman style training starting
Have you
in.
ever done that before?
I mean, I do a lot of like I've never done a strongman competition, but I do a
But
lot of
train.
strongman stuff.
Yeah.
But I want to do more of it, and I want to like basically I want to train from December until next year, like before summer, like kind of around a strongman type training.
Are you gonna
Um,
get some new implements?
so
Are you gonna
I,
make
I
those?
am, I am. I want to build this log out of 4x4x8 posts.
Yes.
This really cool thing that
The log press.
it's a log press that has like this galvanized pipe that you can make for about $100.
Right.
So I want to build that. And I got a 5 gallon, I have an empty 5 gallon jug that I'm going to fill up with concrete that should weigh like about 90 pounds. So that'll just be like a
Like
crazy
your
thing
Atlas stone type
I can just
thing.
like carry around.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so that's like, I mean, so I'm experimenting for that because I was strong about 3 years ago, and I have not been doing very much of any kind of like barbell work or hex bar work over the past like 3 years, maybe like some bench or but not too much deadlifts or squats or anything like that. And I'm looking to get back into that. And so
Craving.
I'm experimenting with how like my hip feels after I
Mhm.
train.
Mhm.
And you know, and trying to figure out how to do my strongman series without too many bilateral movements for my lower back is kind of like my hypothesis in my head. If we're talking about scientific method
Right.
here, uh because I've taken the past 3 years, man, to just do mobility yoga, and I just get this weird thing in my back left hip. And but unilateral work, I mean, it doesn't really hurt it as much, so I've just
Right.
been doing, but I miss doing barbell work. And so I'm trying to slow my way into like a strongman powerlifting type thing.
Feel like you need foot feedback. And some people use like instability, but you could just use like you know those I have one of them here, like those foam square mats.
Yep. Yeah, I
You
have
know?
one of those.
So you put one on each foot when you're doing squats and see if the pressure, feel if the pressure is similar in each foot.
Yeah.
Ideally, you'd want to have like a force plate, right? Like two
Okay.
different force plates, and you'd want to see how much you were pushing through each foot.
Right.
If you're assuming that there's a difference, right? When you're pushing through both feet versus pushing through one foot. For those who are listening, the bilateral versus unilateral
Yes.
section here.
Yeah. So you had that post about the slack line the other day. And
Right.
I actually started really thinking about that my left foot is really weak.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean I've been training for basically barefoot for a few months now, and I plan
Mm-hmm.
to do that. And like I was doing jumps outside like on kind of unlevel grass, and really trying to
Dude, foot training.
like
Yes, I mean,
feel
I'm
every step.
I'm so glad I could be that example for you because I hate actually bringing it up without knowing people are interested because like foot training is one of those things that like either people are gonna bite hard or like run away from.
Right.
But man, I'm telling you, like after I tore my Achilles,
Yeah. And are
and
we putting ankle mobility in with foot training?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think yeah. Well, basically, the reason for the foot training is like leg imbalance,
Okay.
I would say. So I count ankle in that.
Right. Right. Okay.
Because if there's leg imbalance and the weakest link is likely to be in the feet,
Okay.
I would say for a lot of people.
Right.
Like think about the weakest part of your leg. Probably for most people, it's their feet,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
right?
well, maybe, I don't even know how to test that. Right.
I would say in terms of like the muscular development, um, in terms of like their potential muscular development versus their current muscular development,
Okay. So yeah, like
Mhm.
feet. Yeah, definitely feet.
Right?
Yeah, sure. That's
Um,
interesting.
like if you look at like how small the muscle fibers are versus how big they can be in
Right.
relation to the joints and everything. You can see it, right?
I mean,
Like when
maybe I'm not strong enough. Maybe
well,
I need to see it.
I think say it this way. If I showed you like a really muscular foot, most people would go, "Oh, what is that?" you know?
Right.
They're not used to seeing a really muscular foot. Whereas if I show you a really muscular person, people feel you'd still get the from a lot of people, but you'd get they'd be more used to seeing that.
Right. Right.
Basically, really muscular thighs, really muscular calves, you know,
Yeah.
but they're not used to seeing muscular feet, which means
Interesting.
most feet are pretty weak.
Right. Because we're all wearing shoes,
We're all
heels.
wearing soft casts, are like from a very early developmental stage.
Interesting.
You see LeBron James' feet recently?
No.
Oh, I could do a whole podcast on feet.
We will. We should save that for a new
Yes.
podcast.
The next podcast, we will talk about foot strength, basically. But your experiment that you're working on right now, I think foot strength intervention might be really useful.
Now, now let's see. Can I do? And this, I mean, I kind of know the answer to this, but now, how do I train my for foot strength
Mm-hmm.
while still kind of going into the strongman stuff?
Oh, I think it would. I think it would only help for the most part. I think it would. Yeah, yeah, like pretty quickly.
Oh yeah,
Pretty like that's why like. So the perils of working on your weakest link need to be known, which I assume like you've noticed over time training enough, basically. But um, like you work on your weakest link, you have the highest reward a lot of times.
right,
But you need to know when you push it too hard and like what your recovery periods are. And when you're working on a weak link, those recovery periods are unknown at first. So you got to be really aware.
right.
This is the exact experimental stage, basically, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And then once you start, but then because you're going to get all these newbie gains, you're going to feel really fucking good. And then you got to make sure that you just don't gun it too hard
right, right.
when you feel really good. And then you just rinse and repeat and progress a little bit and carry on, my wayward son, basically.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, I think that's what exactly would happen if you work on if you know your foot strength is one of your weakest links and you're also having problems with that um, bilateral balance, like force production.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted you to say. I mean, I wanted you to say, like, make sure everyone knows that, like, if you have something you're working on, like,
Mm-hmm.
it can be the only thing, but you can also, especially if it's something like just strengthening your foot or mobilizing your hips or something like that, definitely work on your normal training too. Maybe you might
Right.
tweak that a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
don't just completely quit everything.
No, you just you keep good principles with your training.
Right.
Like you need to stay aware. You need to not rush through things. You need
Right.
to compare to the last time and make sure that you're progressing in a typical way. Now, some people don't understand what a typical progression looks like.
Okay.
You know,
Right.
so that could be useful for people to know as well, I guess. But a typical progression, if you're starting something new, is usually a little bit quicker than typical progression if you've been doing something for a while and you just tweak the little thing, and even more different if you've been doing something for a really long time,
Right.
for
Right.
example.
Right.
So it depends on like what level you're at with that new thing that you're putting in.
Exactly. And we won't know unless we've been doing a bunch of experimentation.
But tune in next time and we'll talk about it a little bit.
Oh man. Is so anything else with these internal and self experimentations, or is it, have you pretty much gone over everything we want to tell everybody?
I feel like if I talk more, I'm just going to sound more stupid, basically, about experimentation without being like a professor, basically.
I love it. I love it.
But I think like in our field, if you're trying to self-experiment and you're having a hard time, find somebody else to help you out a little bit, and feel free to reach out for a coach. A lot of times, like telling people you're doing it and asking for help is not something where like somebody's gonna be like, you need to pay me right away. They'll be like, yeah, I'll message you and ask you about it. Sure. Just like people are excited to communicate about what they're doing, and like, help others. So like that's not a hard thing to just like talk to someone about, and then that'll help your experiment a lot too.
Absolutely. I know. Yeah. All right. So I didn't have anything else to say there, but so one thing at the end of the podcast, we want to go, everyone go to the Facebook group.
Oh yeah.
The Neat Athlete podcast. You're going to hear in the past episodes us saying Magical Fitness podcast, but we moved away from that to the Neat Athlete podcast.
Yes. Because it has a nice alliteration to it.
What's the alliteration?
Neat athlete.
Neat athlete.
Right? That's the alliteration. I think that's a definition of alliteration.
So I was looking, do you know the definition of an athlete is a person who is proficient in sports and other forms of physical exercise.
I know. I love how it's a contradiction. Yes. It's
right. and then so we are, so our tagline, Neat Leats, should be, we are super proficient in non-exercise activity. So basically we're awesome at doing nothing.
Yes. Amazing. Just right for the new millennia.
Perfect. All right, man. Well, it's good talking to you, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Peace out.
Peace. And that was the episode. Thanks for listening to Self Experimentation.
I know. I love how it's a contradiction. Yes. It's
right. We are super proficient in non-exercise activity. So basically we're awesome at doing nothing.
Yes. Amazing.